Hey guys, welcome back to Cheat Sheet Pros. Today we're going to go over the 2020 MLB sheet. Now, as of today on July 24th, it is not out yet, but it'll be up in the next day or two. Finishing up some tweaks. It takes a lot of time to get it started at the beginning of the year, just with all the different names and scrapes and everything. So these are your 4 tabs down here at the bottom that we're going to go over. We have your legend, and this is kind of the tutorial. I'll probably need to update it, but it tells you the different things on the sheet, what they do, a little bit about them. Then we have pitching, hitting, and our daily stacks tab. So the daily stacks tab I'm still working on, but I'm going to go over that because that's my favorite one to use. So we're going to go ahead and start with the pitching tab. So on the pitching tab, we've got your basic information over here. We got the algo, as with all my sheets, I've got next to the player name. We got the team they play for, the opponent they're playing, the pitcher handedness, so you can determine righty or lefty. Excuse me. And then over here we have the projections and values for DraftKings and FanDuel. And this is always going to be for the main slate. I don't have time to do a separate sheet for every slate and every showdown slate, so it's always going to be the main or the all-day slate. If there's a bunch of early games, I'll try to get it out, and then you can filter it down by whatever slate you are playing. And then if you're looking for a quick pitcher on the fly over here, we have their overall ERA, and then they're split. Now, if they're at home or away, so you can see right here where they are, it says home, away, home, 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 away. This is what their ERA is, and this is what their xFIP is. Now, you can look up xFIP if you're not familiar with it, but it's more of an indicator of what the ERA should be. So the ERA is the actual earned run average, and the xFIP is kind of independent of any luck or bad plays or whatever that might have charged him a run. So you can tell if the xFIP's up or down, and we'll go over this more as the season gets going. To give you an example of one, Kyle Hendricks here. So last year he had a 3.87 ERA. Well, we can see here he's at home, and so he has a 2.47 ERA at home, but his xFIP says it was closer to 4.05. So that kind of tells you that he got luckier at home, and that his ERA should have been a little bit higher than what it was. And then swinging strike rate, and I'll go over these in more detail later on. And then you come down here, we've got the home away, and then this is an always fun tab, and I may add another column or two. So this is the opponent team that the pitcher is facing and how they do versus the pitcher handedness. So some teams, when they face a lefty, they get killed. Some teams, when they face a righty, they get killed. So this is an indicator of how you can figure that out. So here we have your strikeout rate, batting average, WOBA, and WRC+. And in each one of these columns, we've got total, current, and split. So you can see the total, like strikeout rates, and then we've got what their current split is, and then we've got the actual split for the other side. And we got those for all the columns and categories, so I won't go into big detail on this. I mean, you can read the numbers and see which ones are dramatically better or worse on either side. And then we come over here. Now we have pitchers' home and road splits with the same categories. We have their total and their current, and then what the split difference is. So this will tell you ERA, xFIP, K9, WOBA, WHIP, and batting average allowed. If they're better at home, if they're better on the road, you can kind of diagnose some of these numbers and find some tendencies to find some good plays or bad plays based on their salary, etc., etc. And as the season goes on, we'll get into it a lot more. And then if you see like an NA, that's something I'm working on. So he's got a tilde above his name, and it's just not pulling up a match, which I'm still in the process of getting most of those corrected. And then we scroll over here, and then we've got, these are, if you really want to get into stats, these are more advanced stats. So this is how pitchers break down versus right and left-handed hitters. So again, we've got ERA, xFIP, K9, WHIP, batting average, and WOBA, and you can see versus lefties versus righties. Now, where this comes into play, you might look at Verlander and say, okay, he's pretty solid on both sides. Jackie Jack, he's good on both sides. And then you come down here, and this is one that jumps out at me. So Brandon Woodruff versus lefties, he's got an ERA of 5.06, but versus righties a 1.73. So if you're looking for a sneaky contrarian stack, look and see who he's facing, and if they've got 3, 4, 5 lefties in a similar portion of the lineup, then maybe you stack lefties as a contrarian stack, because he is overall a good pitcher. And this will kind of tell you, and some people, like I said, they don't like ERA, they like xFIP. That's what I look at a little bit more. So you can see here, Lance Lynn, lefties get to him. He's really good against righties. So just look at the lineup and see, are they facing a bunch of righties, lefties, is it mixed? And that'll kind of help you, especially when you're doing some contrarian stacks. Or if you're picking a pitcher, maybe you go the other way here. So we got Frankie Montas. Look how dominant he is versus left-handed hitters, a .69. Well, if they've got 5 left-handed hitters in that lineup, then, Frankie's probably a good pitcher to use. And you can go all the way down here. And I just noticed this. This is pretty impressive. So he's got a .69 ERA versus lefties, a 2.59 xFIP, a massive K9 rate of 11.8. And look at his whip, .38 versus 1.71 to righties. So he just dominates left-handed hitters. So even if you're playing fantasy and you've got a guy you don't know whether to start, if he's a lefty going up against him, you could look at that and say, hey, probably not going to play him today. And look at the batting average, .073 versus 344. So this will kind of tell you which way to stack and go. There's a lot of information in this sheet, and there's a lot of different ways you can look at it. So as the season gets going, we'll get some more tutorials and stuff on how to read it. I'm just running through this real quick to get you some basic information. So let's go over hitters. Same thing. We've got hitters. We got position, algo. Stay away from the algo until this gets filled out, because a lot of it pulls off of here. And so this is the last 7 days fantasy points per game, last 14 days fantasy points per game, their ceiling game in the last 14, and then, the last 14 value based on their current salary, and then the last 14 ceiling. So obviously there's only been 2 games, so I don't have enough to fill this out, so I just grade it out for now, but that'll factor into the algo. Now another thing, a lot of big touts, they use WOBA plus ISO as an indicator to find batters for stacks. So a lot of us got into that last year and the year before, so I added it in a column, and we'll go over that. But that's your WOBA and ISO number. And then we got the team, the opponent. And this is sorry if you hear my daughter screaming. She's, I don't know what she's doing. She's outside having fun, apparently. And this is a quick look at the pitcher they're facing. So this is the pitcher's ERA, split ERA, xFIP ERA. Now we saw this on the pitching tab, so now we can look at it while we're looking at batters and looking at stacks. So same information, but we're probably going to look at it in a reverse way. And then everybody always digs in for handedness, see if it's a lefty-lefty, righty-righty, righty-lefty. Well, you can go right here and find it. And then over here we have our standard projections and values for DraftKings and FanDuel. Like we said, these are going to be the fantasy points per game. And then I always throw in another column whenever the sheets start getting a little big. That way, if you're looking at something here, you don't have to scroll all the way back here and try to line up who it is. So I just call it a little name reminder column. And then this is my favorite one here. This is the BVP history. So you can see the player here, and I put it right next to their BVP. So the pitcher they're facing, what they've done. So you can see I just highlighted the top averages. I think if it's over 300 or if it's below 220, it highlights red or green. So you can quickly scroll down here and see the red, the green. You can even sort by this. So for example, Blackman, whoever he's facing, is batting .500. He's got a .554 WOBA, and he's 5 for 10 with 1 strikeout. So I look at that. That's good. It's only 10 at-bats. Typically, they're going to tell you you need 30 to 40 at-bats before it's something that's going to come into play. But lots of times, you don't have that many at-bats to work with, so it's just an indicator. So here's Sano, the pitcher he's facing. He's only batting .143, so he's 2 for 14 with 5 strikeouts. So he's probably not someone you want to put in a stack or maybe avoid in a stack. And then let me see if we got anyone that's up here. So Bregman, here's a good one. So he's hitting .500, 7 for 14, only 1 K. That's good. And we went over Blackman. But you can get a good idea if they're hitting the ball, if they're striking out, if they got a lot of at-bats. Here's one, Carlos Santana's .455. He's batting 15 of 33 with 3 home runs. Anyways, a lot of BVP information to look at in there. And then over here, when we scroll down, we got stats versus pitcher handedness. Whoop! And then so this is the pitcher hand. I put it right here so you can kind of tell. And then with each column, we're going to hit batting average, WOBA, strikeout percentage, ISO, WRC plus, and OBP. And you can see what they are versus lefties, versus righties, and the difference. And the difference should go off what it is today. So if they're facing a lefty, it's going to show you if it's plus or minus. And then you can see what the handedness of the pitcher is. When we do WOBA ISO, the WOBAs I got highlighted green. That's what grabs and goes into the WOBA ISO number up there. And I believe it pulls WOBA ISO combo per handedness. So a lot of big touts that use that for stacks, they just pull the total WOBA and ISO, but we did it versus the handedness. So if they're facing a lefty, we say, okay, lefty WOBA and lefty ISO to get their numbers. And then let me see. So that's the batting. Let me scroll over here. So when we're looking at this WOBA ISO column, let me scroll down here. A couple jump outs. So we have Bregman here at 996. We have JD Martinez at 1055. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight JD. And let's scroll down here and see what his numbers look like. All right, so the pitcher he's facing, he's 5 for 15 with no strikeouts. So that's pretty good, hitting 333, 437 WOBA. He is facing a lefty, so it's a righty-lefty matchup. So his average that we can see up here versus lefties is 439, and he's only hitting 266 versus righties. So huge advantage for him facing a lefty. And then you come over here at the WOBA, and he's 565 versus lefties and 332 versus righties. So again, another advantage facing lefties. And then you can go on down here. Let's look at a strikeout rate. It's 25.6, which is kind of high versus righties. Versus lefties, it's only 16.4. So I'd look at this and say if JD Martinez is facing a left-handed pitcher, he's someone you definitely want to include in your stack. And then you can keep going for ISO, WRC+, OBP. I look a lot at XFIP, WOBA, and WRC+. Those are some stats that I look at. And let's look at one more real quick. So who's the other one we had? Bregman. All right, so let's go over here. We looked at his BVP. We know it's decent. And again, he's facing a lefty, so his average is 405 versus 272, so that's great. His WOBA is 537 versus 391. That's a big jump. Strikeout rate, only 6.8% versus 12.5%. Both of those numbers are microscopic, but 6.8% is just insane. And then ISO 459 versus 222, et cetera, et cetera. You guys kind of get the point. So when you start looking at this WOBA and ISO number versus handedness, and then we'll have the algo mixed in here once we get some fantasy points. So you can find these guys that have a high WOBA ISO, and then you can find a pitcher who's just getting annihilated, and then you can use these fantasy points per game to squeeze in some parts of your other stack. Now, one other thing I want to do when you're stacking, if you want to look at, most people are going to say, okay, let's sort this highest to lowest for pitcher ERA. Now, this just says no because I haven't got his name fixed yet, so let's go ahead and scroll down here. So, looking at this, Nathan Eovaldi, I had a 5.98 ERA last year, 6.84 split, but you have to make sure they're playing on the same team or if they're traded or whatnot. So the 2020 stats, when they come out, they'll be more accurate. XFIP. So either way, all these numbers are really high. So this would be a little contrarian stack that you could try to do. And the first one that jumps out would be Austin Hayes. He's got a big 919 WOBA plus ISO. The other numbers are kind of low, and I mean it's Baltimore, so they're probably going to be pretty cheap. And then you can go down here. Malone would be the next guy. Andrew Heaney, Musgrove, etc., etc. But what I like to do is look at the XFIP split, because that'll tell us a little bit more. And so, okay, Mad Bum, well, he got traded, so he's no longer in San Francisco. So you got to keep an eye on him. So this split isn't going to be necessarily an equivalent to what he was last year. And then we've got Marco. Now, here's a good one. Now, Houston's probably going to be pretty chalky. I've looked at zero baseball for today because I've been working on the sheet for 5-6 hours. So Marco last year had a 3.45 ERA, which people are going to look at that and say, okay, he was a really good pitcher. Well, his XFIP split is 4.64. Or I'm sorry, his ERA split is 4.64. So 3.45 ERA, good, but it should have been closer to 4.6, which is bad. So that just means he got lucky, a lot of ground balls, good plays, whatnot. And then his XFIP split was even worse at 5.51. So if you see this ERA number, ERA split go up, that's good for a stack. And then if the XFIP split goes even higher, that's even better. So Marco would be one I would look to stack, and I would go down to Houston lineup, depending on who's starting, and look at these and say, okay, Bregman's probably who I'm going to start it off with. We just saw Altuve's numbers versus lefties. See where they're at in the lineup, and then start, stacking above them, below them, middle them, mix them in, whatnot. Okay, so that is the main part of the sheet. Now, my favorite one, and let me see, I'm getting quite a bit of time here, so I'll hurry this up, is I call it the daily stack tab. So this is what I spent most of my time on last year, and I blew it up. It's kind of big for the screen so you can see it. So I'm still working on getting some of the numbers filled in, but I just threw in 2 random teams here so I could explain it to you. So for the top part, for there above, that's basically sports betting. So I'll touch on that briefly at the end. So here, this is going to show your projected lineup, and then if they're a righty, if they're a lefty, what position they are on DraftKings, and then versus pitch or hand, I've got their WOBA, their WRC plus. When we get the fantasy points for last 7, last 14, and their ceiling game, we'll get a grade in here that'll fill in for them. We've got their current salary, and then I love this right here. This is my favorite column. So this is the BVP history versus the pitcher they're facing. So you can quickly look down here and see what the average is, how they've done. Like, for example, Mookie is 0 for 5, 1K, not a big deal. But you get numbers like 1 for 10, 6 for 15, 2 for 8, and then it goes down here and it totals them. So overall, this projected starting lineup is 17 for 66 with a 258 average. So that's one of the things I look at to see, do they hit this pitcher? Do they like this pitcher? Whatnot. Then I'm going to look and see how many Ks there are. So there's 11 total Ks. So then we take the 11 Ks divided by the 66 faces and we get a strikeout percentage. So the 258 is kind of so-so. That's average. 17% strikeout rate. That's pretty low. So nothing really jumping out there. And I went ahead and I added in home runs this year so you can see if someone jumps out for a lot of home runs. Same thing over on this side. You can go over here. Now, here I quickly see a 25% strikeout rate, so I would look back and see, okay, it's only 4 out of 16, not a big deal. But you're going to see teams who have 150, 200 at-bats in the season, and they might have a strikeout rate of 35%. Well, that's a big indicator of a pitcher that you might use or a team you might not stack. Now, these are basically lineup information. Now, up here, I'm going to focus on this top. So right here, this has got your runs per game and your batting average, and I think this is the last 14 days. I haven't updated it yet this year. I'm waiting for this to load. There's not enough games yet. Every team has to play one game, but I believe it's like runs per game and team batting average over the last 10 days or 14 days. I'll update it. And then over here, these are your stack options, and so these are the cost of the 5 highest price hitters. So this is a quick way you can look at a team and determine if they're even eligible to stack. Typically, you have your 2 pitchers or a rough idea of what you want to spend on pitching, so you have to find a cost of a stack. So you can see over here, the 5 highest priced guys are $4,800. If you knock off the highest one and go 2 to 6, it's $4,560. And 3 to 7 is $4,240. So what I do is I glance at this and I say, okay, somewhere between $4,200 and $4,800 is what it's going to cost me if I want to do a 5-man stack here with this particular team. And then we got the cheap stack, but of course I don't have all the salaries loaded in because some of the names aren't matching up. So it'll show you the high, the low, and a couple mids. Now this will show you the best 5-man stack and the best 3-man stack. And this is based off WOBA, ISO, and I believe the last 14 points per game, and it will give you the number of hitters right here. So you'll see like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, but it will show you the best 5 stack, and then it'll show you the best 3 stack. Typically when people stack, they do 4 and 4, 5 and 3, or 5, 2 and a random, or 4, 3 and a random. So I just broke it up to a 5 and a 3, so that's always fun to kind of look back and say what it did. And then this last 7 hot stack, it takes the hottest hitters over the last 7 days and gives you a stack off of those. So once we get some full games going, this will be filled in, and it'll have all the stack prices and the best stacks to kind of go with or target. And then when we come down here, this right here is fun. So it says confirmed lineup. This will say in for no, but every time you open up the sheet, it automatically calls for the lineup. And if the lineup is confirmed, this will flip to green and say confirmed. So basically, if you look at the sheet in the morning and you see the projected lineup, and then you come back and you look at it again and it says confirmed, then this is the actual lineup that they are rolling out for the day. So that tells it to you. You don't have to download a new sheet. All you got to do is save it to your desktop and open it up an hour later and check it. Also, Vegas odds scrape every time you open it and they update. I did contact them and they were having a technical issue, so I haven't been able to pull it yet completely, but that's something to look at. Over here, I'll go over this later. These are just some different grades and different stacks, like 1 through 5 hitters, 2 to 6, 3 to 7. If you go off the last 7-day average, the value, the ceiling, I don't know. If people don't use it, I don't mind taking it out. I typically didn't use this a lot last year. I used more up here, and then I focus on this information in the BVP. But once it fills in, I'll go over it again. And then down here, this is the pitcher. So this team here is facing this pitcher. So I'm looking at this and saying, okay, Jeffy, he's a righty. And then we've got our splits. This is how he does versus lefties and versus righties. So like we showed you on the pitching tab, the left and right-handed splits, we have it all right here. So this is going to show how many innings, what their ERA, their xFIP, their WOBA, their K9, their WHIP, and the allowed batting average is versus lefties and versus righties. So you can quickly look and say, okay, if I'm going to do a stack, look, they're doing righty, lefty, righty, lefty, righty, lefty, all the way down. So you can kind of determine, okay, well, he's better versus righties. He's not as good versus lefties. Overall, I mean, let's see here. ERA is a lot worse versus lefties, but xFIP's a little closer. So I would lean lefties here. He's only allowing a 185 average to righties, but he's allowing a 251 to lefties and a whip that's 50 points higher. So I would probably look at doing a stack that's got at least 3 lefties in it. Or, hey, you could even do all 4 lefties and then mix in one of these middle guys. But that's how you want to look at that and how you want to attack it. And I've got these little, you can see this green check mark. So that is a good, and then the red diamond is a bad. So think of it as like a go light and a stop light. And then down here we've got more splits. Boy, we got splits everything. So we have current split and opposite split. So your current split's going to be home or away, and I listed it here just in case the sheet ever pulls the wrong one. I can quickly catch it or someone will catch it and notify me. So the current split, he's away, and this tells you the same thing. Your column categories are up here, and then we come down. This is your innings pitched, your ERA, xFIP, etc., etc., etc. And so this is your lefty-righty split, and this is your home-away split. And then I brought in the swinging strike rate so you can get an idea of the two pitchers side by side. And so these are your total numbers here. I kind of put them real lightly in white above it. So what you could do, you could see his total ERA is 3.4. So if you just want to look at a pitcher overall, you can see his ERA, his xFIP. So these two numbers here tell me his ERA of 3.4 is good, but an xFIP of 4.91 is bad. So he was a lot worse than what his ERA showed. And then you've got your WOBA, your K9, your WHIP, and the batting average allowed. And then you can see how it splits up. So his 3.4 ERA was 2.68 at home, 2.68 on the road, 4.13 at home. So first you got to determine, did he get traded? Is he still on the same team? Does this matter? If he still plays for the same team, then you could look at it and say, okay, he's better on the road than he is at home. Now, this isn't very much of a factor for me with these numbers, so I wouldn't worry about it a whole lot, but it's something to look at. And same thing with the xFIP, 4.5, 5.3. They're anything over 4, I'm fine playing against them. And same thing with the averages allowed. And then over here we got the old bullpen breakdown, so you can see how it ranks, and I'll have to double check the numbers. So this is over the last, I don't know if it's 30 days or 14 days. I need to look and see what my number was pulling, but it gives you a quick bullpen breakdown, and then it shows you the bullpen's xFIP, WHIP, K9, average, and home run per 9 rate. So one of the biggest things is you would have a stud pitcher last year, and then the bullpen would come in and blow the game, and then you don't get the win, and then the pitcher's value drops. So everybody kept asking me to get some bullpen data. So I put some bullpen data in here, because then if you have a crappy pitcher, he gets a lead, leaves the game, but that has a strong bullpen behind him, and he can come in and get the win, then that's helpful for DK because you get awarded the points. So we have the same thing for both pitchers, so you can quickly look at the team, see who they're facing, see the team and who they're facing. And another tricky thing that I want to bring up, so if you've got a good team facing a good pitcher, well, look at the bullpen. Maybe that good pitcher, let's say Chris Sale's throwing back in the day when he was actually good and not hurt, and he gets taken out in the 5th inning because he throws a lot of pitches and the bullpen's shitty. Well, you can practice your stack on hitting that bullpen and be very contrarian in the case, because most people aren't going to stack against Chris Sale. So that's one thing to look at. And then down here, we'll go over this more later. These numbers down here, I give it a stack score versus the pitcher versus the batter, and then we have a combo, a grade and a letter grade. So your grades are going to be like A, B, C, D, and it's based on. So this wouldn't be a very good stack. It'd be kind of mediocre, but we'll go over that more in the future. And then for the sports betting side is basically everything up here. And so you can see the Las Vegas odds are pulled. Now, these two teams, I don't have them scraping everything yet, but it's going to show you the open line, the current line, how much it's moved. It's going to do the same thing with the total. It's going to show you percentages of money. It's going to show any reverse line movements on either side. And then over here, we've got your record overall, your win streak, your last 10, last 20, last 30 game records, kind of like what we used for NBA. Over here, we have your Vegas Edge stats. And so this is just going to be stuff like record, how many times it went, your record against the over, under, and it's these. So as a favorite, what's your record? As a dog, what's your record? After a loss, what's your record? Home team, road team, record. And then we've got as a favorite, did it go over? Did it go over as a dog, et cetera, et cetera. So it's got all this information here. Let me just open that up. And then here, this is more fantasy stuff too. So we have more splits for the team. So these are team splits. So this is your home away splits, and then this is your right-handed versus left-handed. And I just put a quick little text that pops up here. It says today. So it'll be over the versus left-handed pitcher or versus right-handed pitcher, so you can quickly see which column and then what the comparison numbers look like. Now again, they've only played one game, so don't pay attention to the numbers. And then this is going to show you the record home and away, their WRC plus home and away, WOBA splits, average splits, OBP plus ISO splits, and then strikeout rates. And you'll see some teams at home are really good, and on the road they're really bad, and this is what identifies that. So either that will lead you to a stack, or maybe placing a bet on that team or against that team. And then same thing over here, we've got the WRC plus, WOBA, and we've got the different numbers versus righties and lefties. And again, we've got the team, we've got home, away, we've got the current money line, and then I haven't got this filled out yet. I don't know how I'm going to do the games, if I'm going to do a drop-down menu or whatnot. I'm still working on that, but this is the stack sheet. So typically what I do is when I open this up, I go to the pitching sheet, I pick out a couple pitchers that I like with stats. I don't spend much time here on the hitting sheet, and then I come over here to the stack sheet, and I start flipping through games and looking at all this information and trying to find something that jumps out at me, and then that's how I start building my lineups. There's a couple other tabs that I had last year that I will bring back in the future, but they need more games and stuff to go on. But I wanted to just show you guys that I am working on the baseball sheet. It's almost ready, and a quick tutorial on what to look at and how to use it. So anyways, this video's gone long enough. I think we're pushing 30 minutes. So I'll put it out there. Have some fun with it, guys. We'll talk to you soon.